Braindead is one of the most unique zombie movies out there. The traditional zombie horde killing happens at the very end, whereas most of the movie is this eccentric, dark comedy about the main character keeping the secret that his mother has been dead for days. This movie is equal parts about having fun as it is about sincere moments. It's one of a kind, and if you want to watch a movie like this, you really only have Braindead because nothing else scratches that itch the same way. What other movie is a coming-of-age, cringy, dark humor, dramedy, gross-out, gore horror with a romance infusion? I can't think of anything else. You have to watch this movie specifically if you want that. The movie takes the time to get the audience acquainted with the set piece, the Cosgrove Mansion. We know what the house looks like on the outside. The lawnmower is foreshadowed in one of the earliest scenes, and the interior of the house is designed with great attention to detail. Because the audience spends an hour around this place, when the climax of the film arrives, we've acquainted with the space and are able to absorb all of the energy from it immediately and are totally immersed in the action. But what's so interesting is how many different set pieces the movie has. First we're on some island, then we're in the town, then Paquita's family store, then we're at the zoo, the church, the cemetery, the park. All of these locations, and Peter Jackson still takes the time to steadily build the audience's familiarity with the Cosgrove Mansion. Tons of time is spent in the front lobby, which looks absolutely gorgeous. We have a few scenes in the dining room. A lot of time is spent watching Lionel's misadventures in the basement. When Les throws the party, the audience is biting their fingernails because we know Lionel hasn't gotten rid of the zombies yet. And when the zombies sit up in the foyer, there is a level of tension that rises further. You build it up for the purpose of tearing it down. It's seriously brilliant because after the house is completely destroyed, it feels like we went somewhere. What's always stood out to me is that the cards come before any zombies actually show up. This tarot reading injects a feeling of mysticism and magic into the story and is foreshadowing in a very fun way. The foreshadowing doesn't just come from a dramatic irony in the dialogue, it also comes from the supernatural itself, so the movie is basically extending out a hand to help the audience get ready for the supernatural goings-on this movie will have for the rest of its runtime. Paquita is actually introduced before the protagonist, which is interesting. As an aside, I think this is a good way to get the audience attached to your main character because before he is introduced, his fate is foreshadowed, and when he enters the scene, another character becomes linked to him, and then following that introduction, another character becomes linked to him after that. The horror of Braindead is amazing because it's not about one idea or concept. It uses one base concept, the Braindead, and then executes that idea in a variety of ways. The antagonist of the film is a control freak, but they are the first to turn into a zombie. That is the antithesis. Turning into a zombie is a foil for Vera's character, the most horrific thing that could happen to Vera due to her narcissistic tendencies, that loss of control. The second horror element is the idea of being responsible for a well-being of a parent and turning that up to 11. If you haven't had to take care of an older relative, this might not hit home for you, but as someone who has had to sweat doctor's appointments and clean up the bathroom, this particular element hits really strongly for me and is one of the more relatable and long-lasting ideas of the film.
But you look after me, lad.
The third horror element is keeping up appearances when something is wrong. People look at you funny, but you made a promise. Is it more important to you to do your job, or is it better to abandon your duty? Do you allow yourself to become vulnerable and ask for help, or do you try to solve everything on your own because of the fear of people realizing how inept you are is more important to you than solving the problem? The final horror element is the classic doomsday. The threat is so intense that scores of men and women are killed, and it puts pressure on the protagonist to solve, escape, or survive. One thing I appreciate is just how much restraint Braindead shows and how much runtime is dedicated to building it up appropriately for a proper climax and how much that pays off for the story. Because once we get here, Peter Jackson does not let off the gas. I said the final horror element, but the real final horror element actually comes at the very end, realizing that your life might be a lie and that the people who raised you didn't have your best interests in mind. It's powerful, and the film uses this to manifest a coming-of-age story at the 11th hour. Braindead is such a good movie for a very simple and fundamental reason. It has the material to run for an hour and 30 minutes. There's a reason so much horror is executed in the short story format, and that's because when it's a short story, these horror concepts can be executed and completed at the whims of the author, maintaining the mystique of the horror element while not overstaying its welcome. When the directors or writers don't know what they're doing, the film's runtime then turns into the audience waiting for the scares to happen rather than being invested in the story. Each new scene provides new characters, makes room for a new joke, or progresses the audience's understanding of the zombie threat, and Lionel continuously becomes worse the longer things go on. Braindead's success lies in the characterization of its characters and prioritizing that over the scares in the beginning. When it plays more like a dark humor dramedy with horror elements, it can more sharply focus on actually telling a story, and that story is intimate and relatable because the main antagonist is the protagonist's own mother. A non-insignificant reason horror is so often told in a non-traditional storytelling style is because it's easier to make something scary when it's not tied to the protagonist. You can get creative with a monster when you're allowed total freedom. But Braindead casts away this freedom and instead makes the horror directly attached to Lionel and his character arc. This means that Braindead can't tell an unknowable mystery horror, but in exchange can actually tell a traditional narrative with a character arc and themes, something most horrors can't do. Serious praise needs to be given to Elizabeth Moody, the actress portraying Lionel's mother, Vera Cosgrove. She only has like 3 scenes before she starts turning into a zombie, and her performance gets across that narcissistic and controlling personality so well in such little time. She commands the screen whenever she's on it. Praise also needs to be given to Tim Baum, Lionel himself. His performance goes in a lot of different directions, but it's all believable. He does a particularly good job playing the clumsy everyman goober, but can simultaneously turn it up into horror icon badass. It's really cool.
Party's over.
If I had to describe these performances in a single word, it'd be range. Both Tim and Elizabeth portray great range in this film, and that is in no small part due to the script allowing that range to take place. And credit needs to be given for the sincerity of the storytelling, because for as silly as the story is, they play it straight within the confines of the text. When Vera dies, Lionel is genuinely distraught, and I love that the movie actually takes that seriously. This is the kind of thing that elevates your story to greatness, because if you don't believe in it, why should the audience? The practical effects in this movie are quite possibly the most impressive I've seen in a film, not for their believability, but for the sheer amount of effects and how well they're utilized. But some of these effects are intensely believable, and it's just insane how they pulled it all off. How did they manage to make the nurse look so good? It doesn't make any sense. The huge puppet of Vera at the end, the amount of blood and guts spilling everywhere in the climax, the head that gets chopped off and blended, the baby, the scene at the funeral, the dog, Void's guts, that scene of Lionel trying to run away in the lobby. Computer-generated effects are no match. When they have that physical tie to reality, the actors in a scene have something to play off of in that space. The practical effects in this movie are absurd. I cannot communicate that to you enough. It's unreal. Even if you don't give a fuck about anything I have to say in this video, but you like art and filmmaking, watch this shit. You're fucking up if you're not. This is one of the most impressive films ever made, just on an art and creativity level. One of the writers on this project was Stephen Sinclair, who happens to be a playwright in addition to being a novelist and screenwriter. That theatrical background echoes throughout some of the film, as the most iconic moments in the movie are staged like a play instead of a zombie flick. There are big poses with the spotlight beaming down that add a sense of scale and grandness to the proceedings, and it's fucking awesome. It's already hard enough to develop a cohesive and fulfilling main plot in a movie, but when you add on the pressure of a subplot, you're now tasking yourself with delivering twice rather than just once. It kinda pisses me off because this is the last movie you'd expect to completely nail something like this. Hollywood blockbuster style films seem to have some sort of mandate to include a romance B-plot into their narrative, and they so often fail because not enough time is dedicated to developing it, or it is clearly not of import to the directors of the picture, so it inevitably falls flat. Lionel and Paquita succeed so brilliantly because in the horror genre, you need someone to root for, or it risks turning into a different type of story. Paquita is so sweet and romantic that it makes the audience want Lionel to better himself, and additionally, because Paquita is so loyal to Lionel, it makes the audience worry for their safety during the climax more than they would otherwise. Paquita is woven into Lionel's arc of the story. She is not stapled on or exists separately. Without Paquita's positive influence, Lionel doesn't gain the confidence he needs to confront his mother and become the man he needs to be. If you pay attention, almost every time Paquita is not with him, he's far more timid and clumsy, but the moments she is, he ascends and becomes the best version of himself. The romance comes from trying to survive this nightmare, so there is a building intensity to their bond over the course of the film. The other kisses are a little formulaic, but this one at the end is very earned and comes off as so sweet because they're literally covered in zombie guts but still kiss each other anyways. The question isn't, would you still love me if I was a worm? It's, would you save me from zombies while hanging upside down from the ceiling? And would you still kiss me if my lips had zombie blood on them?